Howdy, and welcome to That's Futtuplet, where we take a cool quintuplet figure and try to figure out how to play it in about 5 minutes. I'm Dr. Warren Warren, and today's lesson or today's episode is not so much going to be a quick futtuplet. Instead, I'd like to take a moment and walk through the dashboard, walk through the things that are on the screen as you are working your way through That's Futtuplet. So, yeah, the first thing that I'd like to bring to your attention, of course, the first thing I'd like to bring to your attention is the legend itself, that big box in blue with the meter on the top of it. That meter, we're going to call that meter the difficilometer to tell you how difficile it is. The difficilometer, you'll notice that a lot of the futtuplets and tentuplets that we have on the YouTube channel, these are advanced. Actually, they start out kind of advanced. The books themselves, you'll see when you get copies of the books start out much more simply, and they build slowly, and you have scores and scores of 5-note futtuplets to work with, and you'll notice that they will be simpler in terms of how many strings they cross or how many beats they take up. So that stuff starts out simplified. Again, I'm a teacher, and so I want to start with lots of little successes for my students. But the stuff that I'm putting on this YouTube channel, these are kind of the advanced futtuplets that spill out of my own repertory bag. So things that are pretty cool, but it's a little bit too complicated to have to explain in the book. If I can show you how this works, it'll work out. So I would encourage you to think of the futtuplets on the YouTube channel as as kind of an advanced lesson kind of thing from what we do in the books. The books give you the building blocks and the foundation and the principles, and then you can kind of build some exciting things like what we see on the YouTube channel. So we've got that difficilometer there that goes, of course, like a speedometer from easy to hard. Also, at the top of that blue box, we've got a lot of important information. First off, I put the key there, even though the key is almost always in the key of A for this set of work. Sometimes it'll be different, and so I'd want to let you know. So the first thing we have is the key. The next thing is the scale. Again, as I've explained in the books, a lot of the work that I wanted to do is focusing on a pentatonic. I want to take something that's kind of simple and snazz it up a little bit. Let's see, the position and the caged box. So for some of us, we're comfortable talking about the caged positions. And for others, we kind of think of things in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of thing. So I want to give you an idea of where the left hand is going to be doing its work. And then in the middle of so for the position, the way I think of positions is usually the position is where your first finger is. So we'll just think about it from that. And also, when I talk about scales, up at the top of my legend box there, sometimes I'll have arpeggios and sometimes I'll have diatonic scales like Aeolian or Dorian or Mixolydian or things like that. So all of the time, you'll find that from the scale designation here in the legend. Now, if we move down, the middle of the legend box has 3 options: a cycle, a sequence, or a run. And for us, a cycle is something that just loops around, so it doesn't really have a direction. Sequences and runs will have a direction. So a run is just, it goes from point A to point B. And the sequence is that thing that kind of loops across itself before it gets to point B. So sequences and runs will have directions where they'll be ascending or descending. If here, just for giggles, I've got the Johnson 5s, the most famous futtuplet in our tablature. and I've got that. That's a descending sequence. And so I've got a whole other episode that explains what's going on in that particular sequence. But here we can see that the what I'm calling the string span is the Futtuplet itself. That's the pattern, right? So if and that's the pattern. It's a three-string pattern. It spans three strings, and then I move it to another set of three strings. So when I say it has a range of six strings, that means that I'm moving that three-string pattern across all six strings. And in the beat span, I'm a big fan of having this information for my licks and my riffs as I'm thinking about as a live performer and improviser. I am thinking about how these building blocks fit into time. So I'm not just thinking about the space and the notes that are being covered, but also, is this a long riff or a short riff? Is this something that I can stretch out, or is it something that gets to point from A to point B and then it stops? And if it stops, where does it stop? So this one, the way that I have the whole riff written out is across 5 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that tells me in advance, as I'm thinking about considering this riff in my improvisation, it tells me in advance that I've got a full measure to work with this Johnson Fives riff. 3, 4. Let's just play it with some music there. About 100 beats per minute, not too fast. Wow, it gets serious real quick. Um, Thank you so much, Eric Johnson. Okay, so moving along, we have an understanding now of that designation of whether or not a riff is a cycle, a sequence, or a run, and if it's a sequence or a run, what direction it's moving, ascending or descending. If it's a cycle, I'll just have the word loop there because it's not really having a direction. And then the string span has to do with the pattern itself. The range has to do with the entire riff, and the beat span has to do with the timing of it. And so for some of the riffs, if they have like 3 beats or 6 beats or something like that, you'll want to anticipate that in the chord progression. You'll want to anticipate when you're going to start, and then you know it automatically ends, or you know that it ends at the same time as your chord progression gets there. So I'm a big fan of knowing the beat span of my of the licks that I'm learning. And then finally, the bottom third is just notes for planning, practicing, and performing, uh, and also some notes on guitar technique, on fingerings, on things we should anticipate. Uh, and again, I say this as a teacher. These are challenges that if I think about it to begin with, it becomes less of a challenge. If I didn't think about it or somebody didn't tell me, it might frustrate me and I'd have to walk away and come back another session. I can also take a moment to talk about the tablature that I'm using. The tablature is pretty simple. The music notation above it shows the 5-note groupings, and then the tablature underneath is going to show us the fingering on the fretboard. Um, Of course, with this kind of approach, you don't have to be able to read music notation, but most of us as guitar players in the 21st century, we're quite comfortable with tablature. So, so I want to have the tablature there so that you have a feeling of where the notes are, but I want to have that music notation there so that it's visually striking to you where the tactus is. So for each group of 5, that first note from each 5-note grouping. So that's kind of a key to this approach, to this type of rhythmic playing, where you're playing an odd number of beats, but you're still playing it in time, or playing an odd number of beats within. You're playing an odd number of beats, but still within time. And so there it is. That's Futtuplet. That should take you through the dashboard or the legend and the tablature that we'll be using for our work in Futtuplets. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in and for supporting the work that we're doing here. Please visit futtuplet.com and buy extras of those books and give those out to your friends. And until next time, remember, when you play something badass like this, you play something like that, and all the guitarists in the room turn and look towards you, you can smile back and say, I'm into Futtuplet. Until next time.